Welcome to Shadow of Truth, the 911 call that exposed a hidden nightmare, the Olivia Jordan case. When police in Georgia answered a strange anonymous 911 call, they expected a prank. What they uncovered instead would leave detectives shaken and a community demanding answers. This is the case of 7-year-old Olivia Jordan, a story of silence, neglect, and the one phone call that revealed the unthinkable, the call nobody wanted to believe. On a quiet June afternoon in 2023, emergency dispatchers in DeKalb County, Georgia, received a call that immediately felt different. The voice on the line was trembling, frightened but controlled. The caller refused to give a name. "I want to stay anonymous," the voice said. "There's a little girl in building 2815, apartment 27. She's dead. She's been there for months." At first, dispatchers didn't know what to make of it. Anonymous calls often turned out to be false alarms or neighborhood disputes. Still, the information was too specific to ignore. Officers were dispatched to the Misty Waters apartment complex, a quiet residential area that rarely drew attention. When the patrol unit arrived, everything appeared normal. The apartment in question looked unoccupied, the windows dark, the front door locked, but something in the air felt wrong. One of the officers later recalled a faint, unfamiliar odor near the doorway, not strong enough to identify, but enough to make him uneasy. They knocked, waited, and finally tried the handle. The door creaked open. Inside, the apartment was cluttered but calm, furniture still in place, children's toys scattered in a corner, small shoes lined up by the wall as if someone had just stepped out. No signs of violence, no visible trace of anyone inside. The officers searched room by room, even opening closets and cabinets, but found nothing unusual. After nearly 20 minutes, they left, noting that the residence appeared abandoned but stable. The report was logged as no evidence found. 2 hours later, the same dispatcher received another call, the same voice, this time more desperate. "I already called y'all once," the caller said, breath quick and angry. "I told you what I found, a little girl's body stuffed in the closet. It's still there. She's wearing a pink dress, her hair's still on her head. Please, send someone now." The dispatcher tried to keep the caller calm, asking for details and verifying the location again. The caller's tone shifted from panic to outrage. "That should be all the information you need to get somebody out here," the caller insisted. "You don't need my name, you need to get there." The second call set off alarms within the department. A new patrol unit was sent back to the same address. When officers arrived the second time, they were met by a security guard who said someone had approached him about the same thing. A man claiming there was a little girl dead in the closet. The guard admitted he thought it was a joke until he realized how serious the man seemed. He too had tried calling 911 but hadn't stayed on the line long. By now, the apartment had a reputation among the responding officers. Some thought it was a hoax, others a misunderstanding involving a squatter or abandoned pet. But when the officers re-entered the unit that evening, the atmosphere felt heavier. A flashlight beam cut through the dark hallway. Every corner of the apartment seemed still, the silence pressing in like a weight. "You smell that?" one officer whispered. "Yeah," another replied quietly. "Something's not right." The beam of light passed over a small bedroom door, then stopped. The officer turned the knob slowly and swung the door open. It was a child's room. A few dolls sat on the shelf, a stroller near the wall, and a small pink blanket half folded on the floor. The closet door stood slightly ajar. The officer hesitated for a moment, then shined his flashlight inside. There, against the back wall, he saw what looked like a small shape. Still, colorless, and impossibly small. The officer froze. "Oh no, it's her," another whispered. The room went silent except for the hum of the flashlight. They backed out slowly, radioing for detectives and medical examiners. What they found inside that closet would soon be described by seasoned investigators as one of the most haunting scenes of their careers. The investigation begins. Detectives arrived within the hour, securing the scene and photographing every inch of the small apartment. Inside the closet, partially covered by a dark comforter, were the remains of a young child, seated in a stroller, wearing what appeared to be a faded reddish shirt. On top of the stroller was a woman's red purse. Inside it were two items that changed the direction of the case immediately: an ID card and a bank card belonging to 27-year-old Alondre Hobbs. The property manager confirmed that Alondre had been living in that apartment, but was behind on rent and under eviction. According to management records, the lease had originally been signed by her husband, Cameron Hobbs, who had visited the office 2 weeks earlier to remove his name from the agreement. He gave no explanation and seemed calm. When detectives asked if there were any children listed on the lease, the answer was chilling: none. That detail didn't sit right. If the apartment contained children's toys, a stroller, and a small child's clothing, why weren't there any listed occupants? The next step was clear: find Alondre. Searching for the family, detectives reached out to the Department of Family and Children's Services. Within hours, they uncovered records showing that Alondre had 3 daughters, ages 2, 4, and 7. The 4-year-old was confirmed to be living safely with her biological father, Cameron. The 2-year-old was reportedly seen with Alondre recently. But the oldest, 7-year-old Olivia Naomi Jordan, had not been seen by anyone in over a year. Family members were contacted one by one. Alondre's mother sounded shaken. "I just saw the news this morning," she told investigators. "I'm praying it's not Olivia. Please tell me it's not her." She explained that Olivia was autistic, nonverbal, and had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy. She experienced frequent seizures and required medication that had stopped being refilled months earlier after missed doctor appointments. The family hadn't heard from Alondre in nearly a year. As the details piled up, so did the questions. Why had no missing persons report been filed? Where was Alondre now, and how long had Olivia been alone? A haunting discovery. Dental records would later confirm what investigators feared. The remains in the closet were those of 7-year-old Olivia Jordan. Due to the advanced state of decay, the medical examiner could not immediately determine a cause of death. But one thing was clear: Olivia had been gone for many months, and no one had ever reported her missing. Detectives now had a name and a suspect: Alondre Hobbs, the mother of 3, last seen with 2 of her children, and the woman whose ID had been left in that red purse above her daughter's body. An alert went out statewide. For the officers who had first entered that apartment, the weight of realization was unbearable. The anonymous caller had been telling the truth all along, and somewhere out there, the person responsible for Olivia's suffering was still free. Interviews, contradictions, and the timeline that broke the case. 4 days after the first anonymous 911 call, investigators finally located the woman whose name was found inside the apartment: 27-year-old Alondre Hobbs. She was at a budget hotel in Marietta, Georgia. With her was her 2-year-old daughter, who appeared safe and responsive. Detectives approached carefully. They weren't there to provoke. They were there for answers. Inside an interview room, Hobbs sat across from 2 investigators who began with the basics. They read her rights, asked about her children, and took a calm, methodical approach. The detectives did not immediately reveal what they had found in apartment 27. Instead, they asked Hobbs to account for her recent months, where she had been living, who had the children, and when she had last seen her oldest daughter, Olivia. Hobbs' initial claim was blunt. She said Olivia was with Cameron, her husband, and the biological father of the 4-year-old, not of Olivia. She said she'd been pushed out of the apartment, that there had been arguments, and that she hadn't been allowed to return. She described a volatile relationship and said she felt isolated. To a listener unfamiliar with the case, it sounded like a custody dispute blurred by conflict. Detectives listened, took notes, and then revealed the critical point. They had just been inside that apartment. The room grew still. They told Hobbs what they had discovered: a child's remains in a small bedroom closet, and that the items found at the scene linked the space to her: a red purse and cards bearing her name. The tone shifted. The questions sharpened. If Cameron had Olivia, detectives asked, why was the apartment still full of children's things? Why were there toys and a stroller? Why did the property records show no children listed on the lease? And where, precisely, had Hobbs been living since winter? Detectives now moved in parallel. While one team interviewed Hobbs, another reached out to Cameron and to extended family. Cameron agreed to come in. He arrived with his 4-year-old. The child clearly bonded to him. In his interview, Cameron said he had Mo, Ved, out months earlier, leaving Hobbs with all 3 girls. He said that in the spring, he picked up his 4-year-old for a visit and refused to return her after seeing behavior that worried him. He described the apartment as a place of constant tension. A trained forensic interviewer spoke separately with the 4-year-old in a developmentally appropriate session. The child's words were simple and at times hard to interpret. but some statements concerned investigators deeply. The points weren't presented as proof on their own. Child statements must be evaluated carefully, but they added urgency. Whatever had been happening inside that apartment, it was not a stable home. Investigators also contacted relatives. Hobbs' mother hadn't seen Olivia in many months and was afraid to ask why. A relative who worked in child services also hadn't seen the 7-year-old since the previous year. The family knew Olivia was autistic, nonverbal, and living with cerebral palsy. They understood she had seizures and needed regular medication that had stopped being refilled after missed appointments. Each call drew the same kind of answer: no one had eyes on Olivia. By this point, dental records had confirmed what investigators feared. The child found in the closet was Olivia Naomi Jordan. The case was no longer a search, it was a reconstruction. Back in the interview room, detectives pressed Hobbs on specifics. If Cameron had Olivia, why did family and medical timelines place Olivia at Hobbs' address? If Hobbs had been pushed out, where had she gone? And, most crucially, when was the last moment she, personally, laid eyes on Olivia? After a long pause, Hobbs' story shifted. She said she left Olivia inside the apartment, seated in a stroller within the bedroom closet. She said the child was alive when she left. She claimed she left a bottle of water and some snacks. She described stress, arguments, and feeling overwhelmed. It wasn't a detailed timeline so much as a confession to abandonment framed by hardship. The detectives worked carefully. They needed clarity without introducing answers. Where exactly was the stroller? What was in the room? Did anyone else know? How long were you gone? When asked to account for the duration, Hobbs spoke about staying at her brother's place. Police reports from a domestic dispute at that address in late March placed her there weeks after she said she walked out of the apartment. Combined with the condition of the scene and the earliest anonymous tips, detectives inferred a harrowing timeline. Olivia had been left in late winter and discovered in June. There were still discrepancies. Investigators noted that towels had been placed behind a door and clothes stacked in a way that suggested attempts to block odor or sight lines. A comforter partially covered the stroller, and that red purse, with Hobbs' ID and bank card, sat on top. Hobbs denied staging anything. She repeated that she left water and food, though officers did not find provisions at the scene. In parallel, the medical examiner worked through the evidence with extreme care. The office documented the advanced condition of the remains, but avoided definitive statements until all feasible analyses were complete. The final findings, delivered later, were stark yet clinical: death from starvation and dehydration. Toxicology screening noted environmental exposure over time to illicit substances, but the examiner assessed this as not a causal factor in Olivia's death. The conclusion mirrored what the investigative timeline suggested. Olivia had been left without adequate care for an extended period. Detectives returned to their interviews armed with that knowledge. They asked Hobbs if she had ever returned to check on Olivia or told anyone where the child was. She said no. They asked whether she believed the situation was wrong and whether she had sought help. She described feeling isolated and unsupported. Investigators made it clear that isolation does not explain why a child with complex medical needs was left alone. Outside the interview rooms, the human impact of the case was visible. Patrol officers who had answered the calls were shaken. The property manager was stunned. The lease listed adults only. Extended family members were now learning that the worst-case scenario they had avoided voicing was reality. There was no missing persons report to close, no custody dispute to resolve. There was only a 7-year-old girl who hadn't been seen in nearly a year, until the moment she was found. Detectives also scrutinized the anonymous calls. Who tipped police more than once with precise details? Why did some callers insist the discovery had been made days earlier? And who recorded a cell phone video of the closet that, according to a local station, had been submitted as a news tip? Those questions hinted at people who might have known, or at least suspected, long before the second police search. Establishing who saw what and when mattered for accountability, but it didn't change the central fact. The only person who admitted placing Olivia in the closet was her mother. As they tightened the timeline, investigators compared statements. Hobbs now conceded she left Olivia in the apartment, in the stroller, inside the closet, and said the child was alive when she walked out. Cameron maintained he had already moved out by summer the prior year and that he took their 4-year-old in the spring. because he was concerned about conditions. Family confirmed months without contact and a stoppage of medical care for Olivia after missed appointments. Piece by piece, the case stabilized around a single, devastating narrative. A medically vulnerable child, isolated, unseen, and unsupported, left without what she needed to survive. When detectives informed Hobbs of the medical examiner's findings, they did so without dramatics. The room was quiet. They explained the cause of death and the implications for criminal charges. They asked if she understood. She nodded. There was no dispute left about whether Olivia had died from lack of care. The only unresolved questions were how long Hobbs had been gone, who else knew, and why nothing was done sooner. With interviews complete, children placed in protective custody, and the forensic work aligned, prosecutors reviewed the file. The charges reflected the gravity of the evidence: malice murder, first-degree cruelty to children, and additional counts aligned with the state's statutes. The legal process would take months. The facts would not change. For investigators, the lesson was as old as the work itself. Anonymous tips matter. On the first search, officers saw an apartment that looked abandoned but quiet. The second search, pushed by a caller who refused to let the matter drop, changed everything. It led to the closet, the stroller, and the purse that pointed directly to the person responsible for Olivia's care. It also forced a department and a community to confront how easily a child can disappear in plain sight when systems of support fail and when adults choose not to act. Justice and the final verdict. By the summer of 2023, the investigation into 7-year-old Olivia Naomi Jordan's death had become one of the most haunting cases in DeKalb County's recent memory. The discovery inside apartment 27 had already shaken first responders. Now, the judicial system was preparing to reckon with it. The indictment. When investigators delivered their completed case file to the district attorney's office, prosecutors faced a decision that balanced empathy, law, and the staggering details of neglect. In September 2023, a DeKalb County grand jury formally indicted 27-year-old Alondre Hobbs on 1 count of malice murder, 2 counts of first-degree cruelty to children, and 2 counts of felony murder connected to Olivia's death. The felony murder counts reflected Georgia's provision that a death resulting from another felony, such as cruelty to a child, constitutes murder even without premeditation. Prosecutors rarely brought such sweeping charges in a case built on prolonged neglect rather than a single violent act, but the evidence demanded it. Reconstructing the evidence. In preparation for trial, detectives re-examined the timeline. They mapped phone records, welfare payments, and apartment complex maintenance logs to establish exactly when the family had disappeared from view. The analysis pointed to late February 2023 as the approximate date Hobbs left the apartment. Financial statements showed that she continued to collect disability benefits intended for Olivia's care even after the child was gone. Combined with the autopsy results, those records painted a portrait of quiet concealment rather than an impulsive act. The prosecution's narrative would be simple and devastating. A child with medical challenges was left without supervision or nourishment, confined to a stroller in a closed room. Her mother never returned. The defense. Court filings revealed that Hobbs's appointed counsel did not dispute that Olivia died in her care, but argued that mental instability and domestic abuse had shaped her actions. They emphasized Hobbs's claims of being assaulted by her partner, losing housing support, and feeling abandoned by extended family and agencies. The defense positioned her as overwhelmed and untreated, not malicious. Prosecutors countered that weeks of inaction went far beyond despair. They reminded the court that Hobbs never contacted authorities, relatives, or hospitals and continued to use her child's benefits. They presented text messages and social media posts in which she discussed personal relationships and travel plans. During the same period, Olivia was left alone. The court proceedings, the pre-trial hearings were restrained but tense. Detectives testified about the apartment's condition. The medical examiner summarized findings with deliberate clinical detachment. Jurors, had there been a full trial, would have heard terms like dehydration, starvation, and extended absence of care. But in April 2025, before a jury was selected, Hobbs chose to enter a non-negotiated guilty plea. The decision meant she accepted responsibility without any promise of leniency. The judge asked her to confirm that she understood the consequences. She said she did. When asked if she wished to address the court, Hobbs spoke briefly. Her voice, according to courtroom observers, was soft and uneven. She said she had failed as a mother and that she never meant for it to end this way. There was no elaboration, only a request for her remaining children to be safe and loved. The sentencing, because the plea was non-negotiated, the court retained full discretion. After reviewing the state's evidence and the presentence investigation, the judge pronounced sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 40 years for the cruelty charges to run consecutively. The courtroom stayed silent as the words were read. A few relatives cried quietly. Others sat motionless, eyes fixed on the floor. Reporters noted that even veteran investigators seemed subdued. There was no sense of victory, only closure to a case that had weighed heavily on everyone involved. Aftermath for the surviving children. Following Hobbs's arrest, her 2-year-old daughter had been placed in the custody of Georgia's Department of Family and Children's Services. The 4-year-old, who had been living with Cameron, was also removed from his care after a separate inquiry. Both children were relocated to foster families. State officials declined to release further information, citing privacy protections, but confirmed that both were receiving ongoing medical and developmental evaluation. ION's Community Reflection. In the months after sentencing, community advocates and child welfare organizations used Olivia's case to highlight systemic gaps, missed welfare checks, unverified benefits, and the absence of any missing person report. Local media revisited the timeline, underscoring that the first 911 call had almost been dismissed. That detail, the moment when an anonymous voice refused to give up, became the case's moral anchor. Faith leaders and neighborhood volunteers organized memorials and toy drives in Olivia's name. None could undo the tragedy, but each was a gesture toward remembrance. One officer who responded to the scene later said, "That caller was the only voice she had left." Lessons for law enforcement. Within the department, supervisors implemented a new protocol. Any anonymous report referencing a possible child death would now trigger a mandatory secondary inspection with a supervisor present, even if the first search found nothing. The policy was meant to ensure that hesitation would never again delay a life or death discovery. Detectives also partnered with social service liaisons to cross-check eviction notices involving families with children. The goal was to detect early warning signs of neglect before they escalated into tragedy. The broader picture. Experts in child welfare law pointed out that while Hobbs's actions were criminal, her story also revealed a chain of silent failures: family isolation, unmonitored benefits, and insufficient community outreach for parents of children with disabilities. The prosecutor's office acknowledged those factors but emphasized accountability. Mental health struggles explain behavior. They don't excuse the abandonment of a child. The media coverage that followed was restrained, compared with other high-profile cases. Producers and reporters made deliberate choices to protect the surviving siblings' identities and avoid sensational imagery. The emphasis remained on investigation, prevention, and the quiet reality that it had taken nearly a year for anyone to notice Olivia's absence. Final reflections. In the official case summary, investigators noted that no single witness ever saw violence in apartment 27. What they saw, instead, was silence, the kind that lets neglect grow unnoticed. The final report closed with one understated line: "This case demonstrates the necessity of vigilance when a child vanishes without explanation." Today, the apartment stands vacant. The door that once hid a terrible secret has been replaced, the walls repainted. For those who entered that room, however, the memory will not fade. Olivia's story lives on as both a tragedy and a warning. The importance of listening to the quiet alarms, the anonymous calls, the missed check-ins, the signs that something is wrong, even when no one speaks. If you've watched this far, take a moment to remember Olivia Naomi Jordan, a life that should have been protected. Share this story so more people understand how neglect hides behind silence. Subscribe for more true crime documentaries uncovering cases that deserve to be told, and turn on notifications so you never miss when we bring another story to light.